You pass the bar at 26 with a debt load that would make most people cry, and you take the only job that calls you back, associate at a boutique criminal defense firm in a border city, third chair on cases nobody at the big downtown firms wants to touch. Your first year is a blur of arraignments, plea deals, and clients who can't make eye contact with you because you're the last person standing between them and a federal sentence they already know is coming. You're good at it, not flashy good, careful good. You read every page of discovery twice. You find the procedural error nobody else looks for. Judges start to recognize your name, and in a city like this one, recognition travels faster than you'd like. The case that changes everything isn't even yours at first. Your supervising partner takes on a client accused of structuring, breaking large cash deposits into smaller ones to dodge federal reporting thresholds, and hands you the file because it's tedious and beneath him. You spend 3 weeks in the numbers, and you notice something he didn't. The prosecution's forensic accountant made an assumption about currency conversion timing that, if you attack it correctly, unravels their whole paper trail. The case gets dismissed. Your client walks. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrives at your apartment, not your office, with your name spelled exactly right and no return address. Inside is $40,000 in cash and a business card with nothing on it but a phone number. You don't call for 6 days. You tell yourself you're deciding. You've already decided. On day 7, you dial the number, and a man who never gives you a name says he represents an organization with an ongoing need for someone who reads numbers the way you do. He doesn't say the word cartel. He doesn't have to. Your first real assignment is almost boringly legal. You're asked to review shipping manifests for a produce distribution company, avocados mostly, sometimes machine parts, and flag anything a customs auditor might find interesting before an auditor ever sees it. You tell yourself this is compliance work, preventative law. You are, technically, keeping a company out of legal trouble, which is what lawyers do. You do not ask why a produce company needs a criminal defense attorney reviewing its shipping documents at 11 p.m. You bill your hours like everything else in your life depends on not asking. Within a year, the produce company becomes 3 companies: a furniture importer, a private security firm, a real estate holding group that seems to buy strip malls nobody would ever visit. You realize, slowly and then all at once, that you're not doing compliance work anymore. You're building the legal architecture of a laundering operation. The paperwork that turns a shipment of product into a shipment of avocados, that turns cash into a mortgage, that turns a cartel's money into something a bank has no legal reason to question. You are, in the most literal sense the law allows, the person who makes it all look clean. You meet the man who runs it 11 months in. Everyone calls him the accountant, which you assume is ironic until you learn he actually has a CPA license from a university 2 hours from where you grew up. He doesn't threaten you, he doesn't need to. He talks to you like a peer, like 2 professionals solving a shared technical problem, and that's somehow more unsettling than a threat would have been. He tells you the organization moves 9 figures a year through the structure you've helped design, and that your retainer, going forward, will reflect that scale. The number he names is more than you would earn in 6 years at your old firm. You take it. You tell yourself you're still, technically, practicing law, advising a client on how to structure their business to minimize legal exposure, which is a service every corporate attorney in the country provides every day. The fact that the client moves cocaine instead of software becomes a detail you get better and better at not thinking about. For 3 years, you are extraordinary at your job. You build shell layers so clean that federal investigators spend months chasing paper trails that dead end at holding companies registered to other holding companies registered to a law office. Yours. You personally represent low-level operatives when they're picked up, always making sure they plead to charges that keep the organization's structure invisible, always making sure nothing traces upward. You learn to speak in a specific professional dialect where nothing is ever named directly: the product, the transport window, the associate who had an unfortunate encounter with law enforcement, a language built entirely to let everyone in the room know exactly what's being discussed, while ensuring nothing said could ever be used against anyone in a courtroom. You become, without ever selling a gram of anything yourself, one of the most valuable people in the organization, because product can be replaced and routes can be replaced, but a lawyer who never makes a mistake is the rarest asset a cartel can own. The call that breaks the pattern comes on a Tuesday. A shipment gets seized at the border. Not because of a paperwork flaw, but because a low-level courier panicked and started talking to a federal agent before anyone in the organization even knew he'd been picked up. The courier is 19. You've met him twice. He drove because his mother needed a surgery the family couldn't afford, and the organization offered to cover it in exchange for 3 runs. He's made 2. The accountant asks you to represent him, not to get him a good deal, to make sure he doesn't talk. You sit across from a 19-year-old in a county holding facility who is looking at you the way your first-year clients used to look at you, like you're the only person in the building who might actually be on his side, and you understand for the first time in 3 years exactly what your job has actually been the entire time. You're not defending people, you're managing them, making sure the ones who might crack under pressure crack quietly, alone, with a plea deal that keeps their mouth shut and their sentence long enough that nobody upstream ever has to worry about him again. You tell him, truthfully, that cooperating with the government could get his sentence reduced. You tell him, also truthfully, what happens to people who cooperate. You watch him do the math on his mother's surgery and his own life expectancy, and choose silence, because you've built a system so effective at protecting the organization that even the truth, laid out plainly, points him toward protecting it too. He gets 11 years, you get a bonus. You don't sleep well after that, not in the dramatic way people describe in movies, just a low static hum underneath every night, that you get better at ignoring, the same way you got better at not asking about the avocados. 6 months later, a federal task force that's been quietly building a financial crimes case against the holding company structure for 2 years, not the cartel, the paperwork, because they finally found the one filing you didn't personally review, made by an associate you trained, who made a mistake you would never have made, finally has enough to indict, not the accountant first, you first, because you're the one whose signature is on the most documents, because a defense attorney who launders money for cartel clients makes a spectacularly clean, spectacularly public case. They offer you the same deal you've watched a dozen clients turn down over 3 years, and for the first time you understand exactly what it costs to say yes to it, and exactly what it costs to say no. Full cooperation. Every shell company, every account, every filing you built, in exchange for a sentence you could survive instead of one you couldn't. You think about the 19-year-old. You think about 11 years, and what he'd tell you to do if he were the one giving the advice this time instead of receiving it. You take the deal. Not out of some late arrival of conscience you'd like to claim. You're honest enough with yourself, in the end, to know it's mostly self-preservation with conscience riding along for the trip. But you take it. The structure you spent 3 years building unravels in federal court over 11 weeks, testified apart piece by the only person who understood every joint in it. The accountant gets 30 years, 14 shell companies get seized. You get a reduced sentence, a disbarment you'll never appeal, and a name that will follow every background check for the rest of your life. You think, sometimes, about the difference between the client and the crime. You told yourself for 3 years you were just doing what any good lawyer does, protecting a client's interests within the rules of a system you understood better than almost anyone. What you actually built was the rulebook the system used to protect itself from you. Every ounce of skill you had, every late night, every clever reading of a statute went into making sure the people who profited most were the people who risked least, and the people who risked everything were 19-year-olds who needed their mother's surgery paid for. You were good at your job. That was never the problem. The problem was what your job actually was.